Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, my guests are Rob and Jason from Recovering from Religion. And this stream is a fundraiser, and there is a button for donating to the fundraiser. It's actually a link, I should say, that is pinned in the chat. So if you are wanting to donate to the fundraiser, I would ask that you donate to the link pinned in the chat rather than sending a super thanks. If you send a super thanks, Google will take half of it. And so if you donate directly to the link to Recovering from Religion, then Recovering from Religion gets the entire donation. So I would ask that you give your donation directly to Recovering from Religion rather than by super thanks. But if you do a super thanks, I will pass that on, but it is better to do it that way. Unfortunately, the one problem with doing it that way is we don't get a running total. So if you donate to the directly to Recovering from Religion, just put a note in the chat and we'll tell you thank you, and we'll announce everyone who has donated to Recovering from Religion based on your just letting us know that that's what you've done. And with that out of the way, Rob, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about Recovering from Religion. What do you do there, and what is the organization?
Well, the organization was created, I think it's 15 years ago. Jason, does that sound about right at this point?
I believe 2009, yeah.
Yeah, so I joined it after hearing a lot of references to it on the ACA shows. Right, Matt Dillahunty would suggest people call into the helpline and that sort of thing. And I had coincidentally, when the pandemic, not coincidentally, when the pandemic started, I retired because I didn't think my work site was safe, and I was pretty close anyway. And I had a lot of extra time in my hands. So I gave them a call, found out what they do. They pointed me to the volunteer button on our main page, which is still there if anyone's interested after the show, if they'd like to do that. It tells you what volunteering is about, and then you get into a program where you get trained. So we're basically a set of services to help people who are struggling with things surrounding either still being in a religion, having left a religion, having doubts about their religion, and helping them emotionally and to get through that. And we do all sorts of things, and the helpline is just the tip of the iceberg. We can get to the details later of that.
Purple says it's a most excellent cause. While not my personal experience, I have seen how traumatic it can be for some people to leave their religion. Jason, tell us how long you've been with Recovering from Religion and what do you do there?
Sure. Well, thanks for having us. Similar to Rob, I first heard about RFR through one of the ACA shows. I think I was watching an episode of Talk Heathen. This was prior to the pandemic, and the host at the time, Eric, made a particularly impassioned plea for volunteers. And my background is that I was raised totally secular. I have Greek Orthodoxy on my dad's side and Judaism on my mom's side. And despite the religious backgrounds of my families, both my parents were not particularly religious and raised myself and my brother in a totally secular household. We had full freedom and autonomy to explore ideas, doubt, question, figure things out for ourselves. And so I've lived my entire life as a secular atheist. And yet I've still been very interested and passionate about religion and understanding it and why is our world so religious. So zooming forward to around the pandemic, I think it was a real kind of gut check moment for a lot of people to reassess their lives. Was church serving them? Were their communities helpful for them? Were they safe? And we saw huge growth during that time, and I decided to volunteer. So I've been volunteering that for about 2.5, 3 years. The primary thing I do is I run support groups. I run a local group in the region I'm from, although it's still virtual. I run a number of other types of groups that we have. And at this point, I'm also an ambassador, so I like to go on programs and go to events like the American Atheist Conference back in March, where we first met. And yeah, so I've been doing that for a while, and I really enjoy it.
Wonderful, wonderful. How many volunteers do you have working for you?
So I looked that number up because I knew you would ask. And I don't have like the official equivalent of the roles that are in some office. But you can look on our online community, and we have a volunteer workspace, and we have 471 people registered there. Now, some of those people are going to be the management people, like the executive director or whatever, but the overwhelming majority of that will, in fact, be volunteers. So, and we have volunteers. Not everyone works the helpline, which is our public-facing place. Jason mentioned one of the other things that we do, the support groups, and there are other things we'll talk about later. But so I also looked at, okay, how many agents pick up the phone and answer chats? How many are registered on those channels? So that number is 100 right now. Incoming calls is where we can see people calling and pick it up if we so choose and are free. There's just over 100 people there. And then there's a channel where people can text chat us from anywhere by using our website, and that's the same number. Might be a different group of people. Some people like to do chats and not calls, and vice versa, and some people will do both. So approximately 100 people who are working chats, 100 people working calls, and it's about 4 times that number, a little bit more, totally in the organization doing other things as well.
I also think it's worth mentioning that in terms of our support groups, which is another prong of our ways in which we support our community, we have about 67 groups that are active that meet often monthly in 8 countries, the vast majority of which are in America, though. And so, yeah, we have helpline agents, we have support group leaders, we have people who help manage things internally, maintain our website, things like that. So,
and that's between all those, my latest number that we keep talking about on the RFRX meeting is we have about 40 meetings a month. All right, so it's more than one a day.
Mm-hmm.
When you have international meetings, do you have translators, or how do people be able to, or do they have to be able to understand the language of the person that's moderating?
Most of the international meetings are in Europe,
Okay.
and I think all of them speak English. I know we've started to do some development in Spanish-speaking countries and meetings. So we're trying to find volunteers who speak multiple different languages.
Mm-hmm.
And some, once again, some of our meetings are in person. Many of them are virtual. So no one is precluded from joining any virtual meeting. You can go attend the European meetings if your bedtime allows, and go see what they're like and meet our volunteers and be supported.
Yeah, I mentioned the pandemic got me to join here. The other thing the pandemic did to this organization is all of our meetings were in person before, right? No one knew anything about StreamYard or Zoom, or, they didn't use that. They rented out the basement of the school or something, and then no one could go anywhere in person. So we all had to keep going. We all had to learn to use virtual, and we all use Zoom. And in the last 2-3 years, some of the groups have gone back to in person, but I still think it's the overwhelming majority, right, Jason, that do it virtually.
Yeah.
And they've also created specific groups that just started since the pandemic started, and we learned to use these tools that are only virtual, and they will always remain that way. And there is specific ones. You want to give us the list of those, Jason?
Yeah, we've recently, in the last couple of years, started some specific groups to help certain demographics. So we've got a women's support group. We have a men's particular support group. We have an LGBTQ plus support group. And I think we've been branching out into some other ones, a youth group. I think a disabilities one, I believe, a BIPOC people of color meeting. And so we're trying to branch out to meet certain demographics and meet people where they're at, and give people who had particular experiences with religion help and assistance and support, as well as our total generalized meetings, which are also great. And you get as diverse a group of people as possible. So.
Yeah, the nice thing about them being online, I mean, some people, I get a minority of people when I tell about this, they don't want to deal with virtual, they only want to go in person. Well, there's only so many we have, and in the old days, you might have gotten lucky if there was a group 2 hours close to you, Now you can try any of them, right? If you don't happen to like the moderator one, you try another one the next day, and and you could do more than one a month, or it's for most people this works out better, actually.
Cool. Do you call your volunteers counselors, or is there a different word that you use?
The term we use is peers. We are peer support. Okay. The vast majority of our volunteers have been through their own religious deconstruction. Once again, my position of being someone who's lifelong secular is not totally uncommon, but it is certainly not the most common. So most of the people who help run these meetings, or you'll talk to on the helpline, have been through this process themselves. So they've been through the other end. They know how this journey goes. They know the outcomes. They know how to lean on people, how to be supportive. So peer support is the language we typically use. Now, some of our volunteers are in fact professional counselors or retired psychologists or things like that. But as a volunteer, they're not acting in a professional capacity. So we do our best to just say, we're here, we're with you, we're listening, we hear what you're going through. Most of us have been through similar, and we want to help. And that we're not giving professional advice, we're not giving counsel, we're not giving legal advice. We're just doing our best to be there, to listen, to empathize, and to affirm the difficult experiences that people have gone through, dealing with their faith.
And to point people to our fantastic set of resources. I mean, that's what we mostly do on the helpline, after listening and understanding the situation and telling them about everything else we do, because they might only know about the phone number. But the thing I never forget to tell them is, okay, we have a link that you can go from our main page, you click the button that says resources, and it's available to the public as well as to the agents who are reading through it, maybe as they're talking to somebody to figure out what to say. But you can say, hey, you can go in, it's got items which are put in a database and they're tagged with keywords. So you type the keywords into the database, and it's kind of like Google, but it's not looking at the entire internet. It's only looking at what our people have vetted as good advice on these subjects for the people looking for the topics. So an example, a common call is about the fear of hell, right? People are out of their religion. We're starting to get out, but they're wondering, what if I'm wrong? I have nightmares about hell. So if you type fear of hell into our resources, I think it's about 40 hits you'll get. And some of them are YouTube videos on the subject. Some of them might be online articles. Some of them might be even books or a podcast discussing them. So that's the kind of thing that it's really important to be able to get to people who are struggling with these issues.
Okay. We have people that have joined us in the last 10 minutes. So I want to reiterate that there is a link pinned in the chat for donating to Recovering from Religion. And I would ask that you donate through that link rather than giving a super thanks, because if you give a super thanks, Google will take half of it. And if you do donate to Recovering from Religion, please put a note in the chat and we'll let people know how much we're raising, because unfortunately by doing it this method, we can't see how much is getting donated. But we would love to acknowledge everyone who is donating as a result of this show. Okay, we have a question from Mark Caesar, and Mark Caesar read my mind because this is exactly the question that was on my mind, which was, what are the main problems that people face when coming out of religion, and what does FFR do to help them?
Well, so it's not FFR.
It's RFR,
We
yeah.
get confused about, when I first started taking the calls, I would say, welcome to FFR, because they're all Fs and all Rs, and then they're in a different order. So yeah, the other one is Freedom from Religion Foundation, by the way, which I will sometimes point people to, because they're a bunch of lawyers who will help you if people are breaking the law regarding separation of church and state. Right. Okay, I'll let Jason answer what the question actually asked, what they meant.
Yeah, people face a lot of things. Being ostracized from their community, being separated from their family, being kicked out of a job, being outed in their workplace, feeling alone, feeling isolated, feeling not good enough, feeling blamed and judged. I mean, all sorts of social ills come from no longer being part of the tribe, and especially feeling like the problems are yours internally. It's your fault that you're asking these questions. It's your fault that you have these doubts. Why can't you just be like everyone else and go along and get by and have faith? And it's an incredibly alienating process. So people like that really need help, and they need support, and they need to be listened to, and they need to feel heard and validated. And that is the primary role that RFR provides. Whether it's an agent or a support group where you're helping listen to other people, the not being ignored. I also want to mention that some particular religious communities can go much farther. They can shun you. They can harass you. They can send people after you. We've seen religious organizations, especially in America, where they have so much kind of legal carte blanche to act how they want, ruin people's lives, devastate them, chase them out of town. Oh yeah, people have been sued by large religions. People have had blackmail used against them. I mean, religion is a powerful control mechanism, and when you God forbid I use a Matrix reference, but when you kind of are working your way out, you're going to get flushed. And so there are real costs and consequences to people leaving their faiths, depending on how controlling and coercive the faith background they come from is. And those people need a parachute or a kind of support system to land on when they ultimately reason through their doubts and come out the other side of it. So that's the primary thing RFR is trying to provide is hope, healing, and support. That's the language we use.
I mean, I've had helpline calls from people who are, talking on their cell phones in the garage because they don't want their wife to hear, or vice versa, right? Because even expressing, and I'm picturing probably they had some question that they publicly announced, and it became a big fight, and then they realized from that I have to stop talking about this with my spouse or even my children sometimes, and yeah, that becomes a big issue. Even if the religion isn't one of these that will officially shun you, sometimes that essentially happens anyway from those in your life who are still religious.
Yeah, Demo 10 says Pelagia and Telltale could tell you a few things about exit abuse. Yeah, I've seen that. I have seen that. Okay. Lisa Boban just donated $50 because I love Granny and RFR does important work. Thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate that.
So Jason told you about his background. I wanted to tell you a little bit about mine. So I had a little bit more of a religious background than Jason did. Maybe I might say a lot more, but I did not have a traumatic exit, so I'm kind of lucky. As Jason said, a lot of our volunteers did. They came from Mormonism or evangelicalism or Jehovah's Witnesses, and were shunned, and it's a horrible thing. So sometimes I feel a little guilty about that. Maybe Jason does even more. I don't know. But I walked away from Catholicism when I just realized it was BS. It's like I was a young teenager, and nobody in my family gave me problems because they weren't particularly really religious. They had just stopped going to church all the time when I was very little. Maybe they did Christmas and Easter, maybe, it wasn't, no one talked about Jesus. No one talked about you're going to hell if you do this, and once I had a scientific mind, became an engineer, and we weren't taught that the Bible was literal. I didn't have that struggle that a lot of people who call us do, that wait a minute, for 15 years, I've learned everywhere in the Bible is literal, and the earth is 10,000 years old. And now I'm going to school and I'm learning that's not true. What does that mean about Jesus? So I didn't have that, because in Catholicism, they don't teach you the Old Testament's true anymore. So that wasn't a problem.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No. Yeah. They've accepted evolution, which also means the old age of the universe. That basically, someone has a quote, and Jason might remember, something like, the Bible is not a science manual. It's a book of morality, which I disagree with, but at least they've dropped the science part of it.
I knew that they had accepted evolution, but I've seen them try to weave the biblical stories into evolution and try to come up with
they're theistic
theistic
evolutionists is what they would call themselves, right? So all the evidence we're finding, we're not going to dispute that, but God did it. It makes no sense because it's not directed. Right. Yeah, we've had people on, we'll talk about our Monday meetings where we have scientists and other people talk about things. We had Nathan Lentz talk about all the flaws in human and animal and everything biology. It's like, if God is an intelligent designer, well, he's not very intelligent. So, right. So that's hard for me to comprehend, how they can stick to that story, because they're ignoring those facts. But at least they're not trying to say, well, yeah, the flood happened, and, there were two people who listened to a snake and ate an apple.
Yeah. I had a question, and now I can't remember what it was. All right.
So I'll let me fill something in. One of the reasons I felt it was important for me to join this organization was I've been dealing with religious fanatics my entire life, because I had a very big Italian-American family. And one horrible summer, a pastor came to their town in Long Island where they all lived, and they all converted to evangelical fundamentalist Christianity, except for my parents and my two siblings. All of my uncles and aunts and my 18 first cousins all converted. And of course, we then became the targets of, you got to convert or you're going to hell. And, I had to live with that my entire life. So that's what drew me to, okay, I can't help them because they freaking won't listen to me. But, and we don't deconvert people, but that's not the kind of people who call us. It's people who want to get out of it for some reason, or have stepped away and have problems, and we're trying to help them. I wish someday I would get a call from one of my cousins. But
this is a really interesting comment from Daryl Ray. I will have to look for this. He says some parts of Catholicism have been infected with evangelical Christianity, especially in the U.S., and they've started backing off of evolution.
Yeah, I first learned about that from a caller. I had never heard about that. I didn't track it because I haven't been involved with Catholicism in 40-something years. And yeah, that is absolutely right. It's scary. And I think it might be because people were leaving the Catholic Church and being drawn to evangelical. And Jason has talked about the subject. So Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll talk about this a little bit from a kind of Greek Orthodox perspective. So,
Okay.
The interesting thing to understand about Christianity is the various ways, like how it spread throughout history and how it spread geographically, and the order of events. We have these Orthodox churches, and then the Catholic Church is basically a break off of the Orthodox churches. And American Protestantism is the ultimate branch off of Catholicism, of repudiation and rejection of Catholicism. However, to Dr. Darrell Ray's point, our founder, American Catholicism is very similar in its evangelistic self-interpretation, the same way Protestantism in America is. And there's some very famous examples of this. I think only a few months ago, the current Pope basically not excommunicated, but like deloused. He like removed a very prominent American Catholic bishop from power over this very kind of issue of being radical, of being extreme, of being overtly political, and anti-scientific and all those other issues. But the reality is that these idea sets change over time, and they morph and they split, and there are schisms all throughout Christian history. I, as someone who had some exposure to the Greek Orthodox Church, who were always resentful about the Catholics who broke away, and resentful of the Russian Orthodox who don't follow, who don't speak the proper, Old Greek. Petty grievances over these little things. And also to Rob's point, they have to bootstrap God onto anything that they accept, whether it's scientific, whether it's evolution, whether it's the heliocentric model of the world. They still have to, at the end of the day, say, and God made that the case. And that is a begrudging acceptance, where religion is constantly pushed, repudiated, pushed back by the better evidence we've gathered and understood about the world. But in America, American evangelism is its own beast that is empowered in certain ways and well-financed in certain ways, and so hyper-individualistic compared to older, much more kind of controlled communal forms of these same religions. So much so that most American Protestants really don't consider Catholicism Christianity in the same way that having this personal relationship with Jesus and God.
Oh yeah. I have friends who used to go out to a movie and dinner, to male friends at work who the wives didn't like the particular action movies they liked, so we'd go see them. So at dinner, we had seen a movie, I think it was about the devil. I want to say Keanu Reeves movie, Constantine. I think that was it. And so we're sitting talking about the movie, and then so there were three other people. One's an evangelical Christian who homeschools his children and believes in Noah's Ark. And one's a kind of a lapsed Catholic, and the other one is probably, he would call himself an atheist, but he still goes to church because of his kids. So we got into the discussion about the reality or not of the movie Constantine, and the very religious guy goes, "Rob, you better get right with Jesus, because that movie is fiction, but the basis behind it is true, and you're going to hell." And my other two friends are laughing, and he goes, "You guys don't laugh because you're going to hell too. You're Catholic." So, okay, you guys figure out who's going to hell, then maybe.
Funny how often hell just becomes a cudgel to use against people you don't like.
I'm really curious about something you said earlier, Jason, which was that some people have been sued for leaving their faith. Were they sued by their church for support?
I think we had a speaker not too long ago talk about this what Rob mentioned. Monday nights we run programming where we often have a speaker or an expert or kind of public figure come to give a talk. We've heard stories about basically Mormonism and Scientology are in particular litigious and controlling, and just do all sorts of basically spying on people, and even Jehovah's Witnesses do this too, where they will send people to check up on you to try and bring you back in. I know very famously Scientology has tried to sue a number of people who have either tried to expose things about the organization or who were members and then formally then left. But once again, in America, if you live in a state where there aren't there are no anti-SLAPP laws, or religions are particularly empowered or in bed with the kind of state governments. They have tremendous legal authority to go after people for whatever reason they really see fit. And that's a scary prospect. That's not the typical experience, but it's possible.
Scientology has a whole organization, and I should know the name, but I forgot it now. Tip of my tongue, can't remember it. But it's basically organized to go after people who leave them and are vocal about it. I think if you walk away and you don't say a thing, you might be okay. But if you're vocal about it, this organization will set out to destroy you by legal or non-legal means. I mean, they will go to your neighborhood and flash a fake badge and say, we're investigating your neighbor there for being a pedophile.
Wow.
Do you have any information on
that? They'll try and ruin your reputation.
And ruin your reputation. They'll go to where you work and do the same thing. They are despicable. They'll put up a website. If it was me, thetruthAboutRobPalmer.com, and it's just all freaking lies. They do that kind of thing.
Wow. One of the reasons I was so interested in that was an experience that I had as a Christian, and I had not even left the faith when this happened, but it was with a very large charitable organization, Compassion International. I had supported children through that organization for probably about 30 years. And when I decided not to do that anymore, I canceled it. And Compassion International reported me to the credit bureau for failing on my obligation. And I was flabbergasted because I had no financial obligation to them. I had no contract with them. They had provided no goods or services to me. Now, my credit rating is so high that what they did had no effect on me. But to someone who is in a position where that could have been a problem, I looked at that and I said, that's incredible that they would do that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow.
It seems like charity has a different meaning to them than to us.
Yeah.
Somebody put in the chat the answer to what I couldn't remember. Office of Special Affairs, OSA, is a Scientology branch of it. And so Mike Rinder was in charge of that. And he's the one who's the co-host with Lisa Remini on the podcast, right, about Scientology. And he left, and then they went after him. Yeah. Yep.
And once again, I want to give an example that, a young mother trying to leave an organization that's high control, they'll call CPS on you. That's the kind of stuff that can be done. There is all is fair in religious indoctrination, and there are no limits or bounds to what the extent of religion will go to. I mean, look at all the scandals that there have been, whether it's in the Baptist Church, whether it's in the Catholic Church, about the willingness to cover up crime, the willingness to engage in the most illegal acts to protect themselves. They will harm anyone who they see as a threat. And that's why it's very hard as someone who's once again been a lifelong atheist to just be like, live and let live, have your private beliefs. There is no universe in which these beliefs remain private. They will always bleed out into trying to control other people, trying to dictate other people's lives. And we have to be able to push back against that and help the people who are victimized by it.
Wow, that's really something. What are some of the successes that you've seen with your organization?
Meaning,
that's a good question.
Well, one of the things is that we've been growing ever since it was introduced. It started with, I always get the order messed up, but it might have been the support groups initially that were in person. And then the helpline was added, and then we added a chat line, and then we figured out how we can use the web to chat from anywhere in the world. Started adding these resources that we talked a little bit about. We had the online community, which we can talk a little bit about also. The most recent thing that we added is our weekly Monday meeting, which we hold maybe every weekend, every Monday, except once, just to get a break at Christmas time. So we've had 51 meetings ever since the pandemic started. Every Monday evening, we call it RFRX. And we alluded to it a little bit. We have guests, people from the secular and humanist community, from science communicators, people talking about critical thinking, and we've amazingly kept it going. When we started it, we thought, this would be a short-term thing, and there are now 201 episodes on our YouTube channel. So you can go to our main page, go to the online media, and then click RFRX events, and you'll see what the next meeting is, which, by the way, is Stephen Hassan. That's tomorrow, the person who created the BITE model of cult control. Yeah, and then there's a link to our YouTube channel that gives you the 200 episodes of everyone from like Matt Dillahunty to Seth Andrews to Mr. Deity to science communicators and YouTubers. It's quite amazing, the list of people that have helped us do this.
And we often poll internally. Rob has done a few. I've done a couple.
Jason's done. Yeah.
It's a good time. But I do want to answer your question in a different way, which is, how do we know as an organization when we've succeeded in helping someone? And Rob mentioned it, that we have an online community where you have to call into the helpline to join. But we see people's stories there. We see them transform. We see them go through these difficulties. We help them. And it's really encouraging to us when someone says, you know what, I'm actually past this part of my life. I'm ready to move on. And so it's very intentional that we use a bridge in our imagery. We want to help people across this. And it's not like, oh, no, you have to stay with us forever. We're going to be here as a community to help people if they need us, if they want us, if they need the support. But we're so happy to have people move on with their lives and move on to bigger and greater and better things, and no longer need that kind of life support system to get out of religion.
And some of them become volunteers.
Yes.
I was just going to ask that. Yeah.
But also there are people who, I have one recently that I remember where he felt we helped us and he was able to move on with his life, and he's feeling empowered and better, and he's got a better relationship with his wife, and he got through this journey. And without us being there, that would have been a much more difficult time. And I know it's something a lot of our volunteers talk about, which is they wish they had RFR when they were going through this. They felt they were going through this alone. So it's important for us as an organization to track, well, what is success? How do we measure this? How do we know when we've done our job and really served people's needs? And then how do we continue to help people who are still struggling, still stuck, still feeling like they can't progress through this issue? So it's a great question. I'm really glad you asked it.
This person that you mentioned that was struggling with his relationship with his wife, was his wife still a believer?
Well, I don't want to give too many details about them in particular, but I think they were ironically, it's a dynamic that often comes up, which is, one member of a relationship is leaving the faith, the other is not. And how do you now deal with this existential, foundational, view difference? I think in this person in particular, they were both kind of leaving and deconstructing at the same time, which was great. But, how do you rebuild community later in life when you've built your entire life and foundation around religious acceptance and this kind of stuff? So it's just an example of how we want to help people through that process.
Which is exactly why I asked the question, because my husband is still a believer. I left the faith 5 years ago, but I've been married for 42 years. And religion was the number one thing in my life until I deconverted. But my husband, is still in the faith. And
does he know you do this?
Excuse me?
Does he know you do this?
Yes, he's well aware. In fact, he's even bought me some of my equipment.
Okay. So we had a volunteer for years, was volunteering for us and had to keep it secret. And like he actually was like a department director or something like that, where he'd be running meetings, and he had a meeting scheduled, and I got to cancel the meeting today. My wife is home from work sick, and she doesn't even know I do anything to this organization. Sorry. Yeah.
I don't listen to atheist content when my husband is around. And one thing that's kind of funny is my lunch routine is that I always watch atheist YouTube while I eat my lunch. And my husband is in his office working, and he's talking about retiring now. And I said, one of the things I really enjoy in my day is watching atheist content while I eat my lunch. And he said, that's okay. You can keep doing that. Although if he comes out of his office while I'm watching, I will usually mute my YouTube video until he goes back in the office and then turn it back on again.
You can use earbuds, so then you wouldn't even have to do that.
There we go.
That's also an encouraging sign of compromise and acceptance, and allowing you to do your thing and you allow him to do his thing. Those kinds of negotiations get difficult when it's like you're going to hell. And the relationship dynamic is always a really difficult and fragile one for us to try and help people with, but it's really common, whether it's mixed faith marriages, one person leaving, then both leaving at the same time and having no idea what to do.
So The volunteer I mentioned before actually has gotten through that with his wife and did one of our Monday talks about interfaith marriage because he's made it work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the head of our ambassador program, which
Oh,
why I'm here
cool.
today. So
Cool. One of the ways that we made it work is religion is a taboo subject. We don't talk about it.
Right. So
Okay.
can I ask you if it, because a lot of the calls, all right, so as I said, I started this when the pandemic started, and almost immediately, a lot of the calls, and this probably didn't happen previously, delved, and it hasn't stopped, delved into politics, right?
Mhm.
Because all of a sudden, the person stepping out of the religion, I don't have to listen to you people saying God's going to save me and I don't need masks or vaccine. And, you know, their family was still in that mindset because that's what they're being told in the churches and by the politicians they follow. So does that become an issue with you guys?
No, it has not, because he and I have always been on the same page politically.
Good.
He's for a Protestant, if fundamental Christian, he's extremely liberal. He just keeps his politics to himself when he's at church.
And it's important to remember the history here that religions have been a part of every single political movement in America, whether they be revanchist ones that want to kind of take us back, or they be progressive ones that want to pull us forward. It's something important that I think, unfortunately, a lot of people in the just secular and atheist community don't have, you know, expertise or training or knowledge or education about, like, political organizing. And central to the kind of separation of church and state movement is, like, you need religious people who understand that it's good for them too. And I did just want to very quickly say that RFR is a nonprofit. We're a 501c3 organization, which means we don't specifically endorse or support or negate or say you shouldn't vote for a candidate, you should vote for a candidate. That is the legal limitations and strictures that we have to kind of operate within. However, as is self-evident to everyone, religion is explicitly and implicitly political. It is about how we live. It is about the decisions we make. It is about our morality. It's about our sexuality. It's about how we interact with each other. And so you can't avoid talking about religion and politics. And I laugh because I heard that all the time as a kid, you know, from my peers. You know, we don't talk about religion and politics. Like, that's what life is. So we kind of have to confront it. And, you know, electoral politics is the limitation that a nonprofit like ours has to kind of steer clear from. But religion is inherently political, and we talk about it all the time, and we want to help liberate people and help people self-actualize and accept themselves, and aid people who have been prior, you know, otherwise marginalized by their religion or not, just live a better life.
There's a couple of comments that I've been holding for some time. The first was, we get calls and chats from all over the world, including Muslim majority countries. That must be awfully difficult.
It is. In fact, our system, so our technical system, one of the things our volunteers do is rework our software to make it more useful for our clients as well as the agents. And one of the things recently it's done is it's taken away the responsibility from the agents to have to look up what country you're calling from. Is it a Sharia law country? Are you in danger? It now, like, identifies that automatically. And, you know, basically those people will have to go onto a VPN or a Tor browser so that they can't be tracked by their government if they feel like it, because yes, their lives could be in danger. And, you know, we have to ask, if they're talking, especially not just chatting with text, you know, are you in a place that anyone can overhear you, that kind of thing, because yeah, their lives could absolutely be in danger.
Okay, and the other comment that I've been holding, earlier you mentioned that you take a break at Christmas time, and the question came up, isn't this a time that people are in most need of help sometimes? And Daryl Ray has commented, at Christmas time we actually add a couple of online support groups because it is a time of stress for many, but our RFRX hosts also need a break sometimes.
Yeah, so
we've added some. Oh, go ahead, Rob.
I just say, yeah, so we get one week off a year. For some reason it happens to be that week, and then we actually have recently, around Christmas, at least the last 2 years, we did a special show regarding how do people who have stepped away from their religion, you know, celebrate the holidays, you know. And that's an interesting topic. One last year, and we're going to make this a yearly event, I think, we did Deconversion Story Hour, and we had 5 volunteers, including me, tell their own stories, because we find that helps people a lot. But go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I just wanted to also add that we've added Thanksgiving support groups. I believe last year we had a Valentine's Day support group because we recognize that while, whether these holidays or traditions are arbitrary or deeply religiously rooted, people are struggling and looking for community during those kinds of times. And if we've got volunteers available, we'll put a group together to help people and broadcast and so give people the support they need during those periods. Rob is right that generally speaking, we take like a programming break around that time of year, just so it's not 24/7, 365. But our helpline is still 24/7. But
it's also a little difficult to get guests, that one week. So that's another reason, possibly. Yeah.
We have a comment here from Rochester Swift. Finding affordable secular recovery solutions for addiction is a huge issue in the United States. 12-step groups deny they are religious when we know they are, and they get funded anyway. Yeah, and FFRF recently won a lawsuit where a man was put in prison for not going to church. He had as a term of his probation that he had to attend a recovery program.
The Texas thing, I think.
Yeah, and the only one available was a religious program, and the program required you to go to church as part of the recovery program, and he said he wouldn't go to church, and they put him in jail for it.
Unfortunately, once again here, judges have huge discretion when it comes to giving out sentences and things like that. And they can basically conscript you, force you to go to religious services or whatever is within a reasonable distance. And it's like, that's a violation of our human rights. So I'm glad they fought that case. And it's a good example of how atheist and secular organizations are attacking these things in a broad way. So FFRF is great at tackling this issue legally. We want to be here as a kind of support system for people who are struggling, and that there's all sorts of tactics. It takes all sorts of strategies to help push this movement and help grow this cause. And we're happy with that delineation. We're happy that organizations aid in one way and we aid in different ways.
Sorry, I got distracted and I forgot what I was going to ask next.
I also want to mention briefly that there's an organization called Smart Recovery, which I don't know if we've officially partnered with. We do work with another organization called the Secular Therapy Project, but certainly getting a therapist who's not, telling you to pray or read your Bible, getting a kind of recovery program that is not explicitly saying cede yourself to a higher power. There are secular means to do this and to get through this. I don't think you need anything more than secular humanism to live a good, fulfilled life. And the more organizations like that exist, the better, to get people the help they need.
Okay, I know what it was that I wanted to bring up next, which was I wanted to reiterate the donation. This is a fundraiser stream. There is a link pinned in the chat where you can donate to Recovering from Religion. And if you give a donation, please put a comment in the chat and we will thank you for that. We have a comment here from Derimo10. The candy holidays are the hardest. And to one extent, I agree with you, but to what extent I disagree. And that is this: when I was a believer and I was all in, to me, Easter was the most important holiday of the year. But I find it so amusing as an atheist that you can get candy Jesus around Easter time and eat him.
I think it also might be a pun that they're literally hard because of hard candy. So.
Oh. Okay. Tell us a little bit about the online community.
So yeah, that's that is one of the ways that people can connect all the time, whether or not RFRX is on a break or they can't get somebody on the line because we need volunteers and we don't pick up all of our calls. We try to, but sometimes we don't. But if you're in the online community, that's always available. It's basically like a Discord server, but it's not Discord. It uses a different application, and it's called Slack. And once you're in this community, you have chat channels where you can talk to other people who are interested in that same topic, and each one is moderated by volunteers. So it's a very safe space. And per our topic we were just talking about, I'm looking at the list right now. One is addictions, alphabetically at top of the list. So people who have substance issues can talk about those there. We have even a book club. We have a channel to discuss street epistemology, just reading a few of them. There's like 30 of them. There's Black
Mhm.
Mountain Believers, there's Christian, there's clergy. There's one to talk about critical thinking, one with family issues, a specific one for some other religions, Jehovah's Witness, Jewish. There's LGBTQ+. All together is about 30. And then the other thing you get if you join our online community is we have 2 weekly hangout meetings, which are not like the Monday meetings we talked about before because there is no guest. But there's 2 hours or sometimes more, right, Jason? Jason is
Yes,
awesome.
as a host of one of them, they often can go for a very long time.
Yeah, and people just can, talk to each other. It's moderated by Jason and others, and that's a really good perk. So if you're in our online community, you'll get the notices about those to remind them. And when are we holding them now, Jason?
Fridays and Sundays.
Yeah.
And yeah, just to reiterate Rob's point, like this is not an official support group meeting. It's just it's a space for people to share and be themselves and talk about serious topics or talk about goofy topics. In fact, this past Friday, we had a very long-ranging discussion where we went from talking about, deep theological issues to then just like what our favorite movies and music are. And that breadth of ability to share really shows the strength of our community. That it's a community when you can share anything that's on your mind, not when you're only kind of gate-kept to these few narrow topics. So yeah, we love doing that. And the online community is where I spent a lot of my time initially. Of help moderating, checking out channels, responding to people, giving people resources, talking them through topics, and it's a great boon.
And you'll see people who you recognize them because they've been there a long time, and they, per our previous topic, they wind up helping other people there. They're clients themselves, but they've recovered to the point where they can help other people. Yeah.
You mentioned the fall excursion. Tell us what the fall excursion is.
Yes, so the Fall Excursion is an event that we hold every year. I'm not sure when that was started, but it's been around every year that I know about. And they hold that on, this year it's going to be September 27th through the 29th. This year it's in Charlottesville, Virginia. And you can click the link on our page. It shows you all about that. And it's a time to get together with other people, and it's been basically talked about like it's a retreat without the religion. We have special guests. I mean, in the past we've had famous YouTubers there, and I'm sure that's going to happen this year again. Dr. Ray goes, and people can mingle, volunteers and clients, and the special guests that we've invited.
Yeah, I've gone to the last 2 years excursions. I got to speak at the one last year. It's a wonderful event. Just like Rob said, it's an in-person event. We're all going to go to the same location in Charlottesville, Virginia, to a large campsite. Sometimes we're in the same location for a few years. Sometimes we change. And we're expecting a large amount of people to all kind of be together, eat food, bond with each other, reminisce, talk about our plans. It's a great event. I've enjoyed it so much every year. It's so cathartic to kind of be back in person with people, and to realize that this community is not just online. It's not just digital. We're not all just behind screens. We're all real people living our lives. And it's a wonderful event. I couldn't recommend it stronger. So yeah, definitely go to our link, check out the website, and see if you can attend or fit it into your schedule.
Well, this looks good. $80? That's inexpensive for a retreat.
I think that's just the lodging.
Okay.
You'll be able to scroll through it to see the registration. But for people who are struggling to afford things, we have, once again, we did a fundraiser earlier this year, which helps us pay for this and afford it. And if people are really struggling, they can apply basically for some assistance for the costs. And we want as many people to show up to this as possible. So there's always financial assistance that can be had. And I would just recommend to check it out and see if it's interesting to you.
Okay.
Who were the famous persona that were there when you went, Jason?
I think Holy Kool-Aid was there.
Oh, Thomas Westbrook.
Yeah, Thomas Westbrook. I can't remember the name of every speaker, but we've had a lot of great people. I know this year I think we had Mandisa Thomas a year or two ago as well, helped run our karaoke. And this year we are going to have Shelley Siegel, I believe. Who's going to do some performance, some music. And something else I wanted to mention is during this fall excursion, it's like 3 days of events, activities, hiking. We're going to run support groups in person when we're there. We're going to share food together. We're going to watch movies. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to sit by campfires. It's going to be a great event.
One thing I've kind of wondered about is dealing with minors. If a minor calls you and says, they don't believe what their parents are what they're learning at church, but they still live with parents, how do you deal with that?
That's a good question.
Yeah, so the youngest person who's ever called me was 15. And,
okay.
And yeah, that's a little bit too young to be invited to our online community. The only, by the way, if I mentioned it before, the online community, the thing where there are all those channels and chat, you can only get there by making a call and chatting in, and then the agent will essentially, determine if you're appropriate for it. And yeah, there is an age limit for that. So that felt a little bad because I couldn't invite the person, and otherwise they would have been appropriate. But we told them all about all of our other things. So
I believe our age limit for Slack is 16, the minimum age. And to your question, though, it's tough when someone is not financially responsible for themselves or independent. And our advice is, grit and bear it for the next 2 years until you're out of the house. But it's help people navigate getting access to new information, new resources. And unfortunately, once again, we can't really do anything to change their circumstances. But we want to help them handle whatever their difficulties are, and then ideally give them the resources to help become more independent, more stable, more on their own. Whether it's helping them, look at college, whether it's helping them just move forward in their life and feel more empowered when they're older to kind of start being the author of their own story.
It's one of the big problems when it's someone who's essentially financially, reliant on someone else who they believe will not take kindly at all to finding out that they don't believe what they're supposed to believe, and that's really hard. That person who called was, had questions, as I recall, and was like really raked over the coals for just asking one simple thing, and decided they're going to shut their mouth and not ask their parents anymore. They were being sent to a Christian school, all their friends were Christian, and they found us, which is good. I don't know if they've pulled back and gotten anybody else. Now they would be older. That was about 3 years ago. But yeah, basically had to, have the conversation about, everything you do in life has a plus side and a minus side, and you have to weigh the benefit versus the retribution. And, you're going to get older to the point where it won't matter anymore. And how important is it to you to be truthful and honest, even though that feels good? And yeah, that's a conversation we have to have a lot. And one of the bad things, if someone is that young and they're financially reliant on their parents, that's problematic too, is one of the things we always can recommend to people. I have to pick my cat up because she's screaming. Okay. Yes, I'm a childless cat person. Okay. So, yeah, so the Secular Therapy Project with Jason, I think, mentioned peripherally, it's a sister project. We vet therapists who are going to use scientific methods in therapy. They're not going to use any religious beliefs. They're not going to tell people to open the Quran or the Bible and read Genesis to fix your marriage. So, that's often something we will recommend on the helpline to somebody who needs that. And you can't do that with a kid whose parents are paying for them. They're not going to have the money for it, and they don't have their own insurance. So that's I always feel bad about that.
Have you ever had a parent call in and complain that you had counseled a child?
No.
Not that I'm familiar with.
Okay.
Can't say it never happened, but it never happened to me. Okay. Yeah. And one of the things we make clear, by the way, is we don't deconvert people, right? It's not our goal to talk people out of whatever they feel happy with their religion. If you're feeling happy with the religion, then don't call us. We're not going to try to say, no, that's wrong. Don't do that. Occasionally we'll get a troll who does do that, but we're trained to try to disengage from that as soon as possible, because we're not the atheist experience that's supposed to be arguing with people.
Yeah. We are not a confrontational anti-proselytizing organization. That's not what we do. We're not there to counter religious efforts. We're there to help people who have already started to doubt and are seeking help and guidance.
Right.
So we let people come to us. We're not going out there to tell anyone they're doing it wrong.
What is the STP?
Oh, that's a secular therapy project.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to briefly mention about this secular therapy project. It too is growing, and there have been some innovations since COVID of basically telehealth, which is people being registered basically to do therapy across state lines. Normally, that's been pretty limited, but there is legislation in the works, and a number of states have kind of made alliances where someone who is in Connecticut can do therapy for someone in New Jersey, just as an example. And that's important because, once again, so many therapists have moved to online only in their practices. And one other point I want to mention is, to Rob's point, not only will they not use religious methodologies in their practice, and they'll rely on evidence-based best practices when it comes to psychotherapy. Many of the secular therapy project therapists are also trained in things like religious trauma, and they'll be able to help someone with their issues of religion. They're not just a marriage and family counselor. So once again, it's hard to find, and finding a good therapist is almost always expensive and difficult to do. Where I happen to live, it's a little easier. There's a lot of therapists around where I live, and my mom is one. But
my wife as well.
Yeah, it could be very helpful. But
yeah, and I know from that
the goal for that organization to grow.
After when the pandemic started, especially, it became really difficult to get a new appointment with a new therapist because there are so many more problems, and it takes a while to become a therapist. And so I actually always give people a plan B. So when you apply to the secular therapy project, the first thing you'll see on the website there is register as a client or register as a therapist. And most people will register as a client, right? And you put your information in, you contact people, but there might be 5 or 6 in your state, and they might be so busy that they can't get you on their schedule for a while. So the plan B is you go to register as a therapist, and the first page there is the first hurdle someone applying to the secular therapy project as a therapist has to pass. They have to follow all these rules, and it says what they are very specifically. So I would say you print that out or use a PDF or whatever, and if you're going to go shopping online, the normal way you would to find a therapist, that's your that's your shopping list, right? Before I waste time coming to you and you waste time with me, you need to be able to agree to these things. Right.
It's a great point, Rob, that people often kind of feel disempowered when they speak to a new therapist. It's like, you're there to interview them. Yes. You're there to see if they're a good fit for you, not just, you're beholden to them. Right. It's supposed to be an equal relationship.
And like you said, they're specialized in certain things too, and you want to make sure that hey, do you have clients who have these issues? Do you have experience with that? Yeah. Like, you don't bring your Ferrari to a Toyota dealer, all right? Right? They might be good car mechanics, but it's a specific issue, and just because you graduated or got certified as a car mechanic, it's very specialized, and that is the same with therapy.
Okay, very good, very good. We are almost out of time. Is there anything that you would like to tell the audience that we have not discussed?
Let's see. We've been mentioning recently that we're growing our organization in Australia. So we actually have an RFR Australia now. So anyone who's there and listens to this, you can find that information on our website. And we have a new YouTube playlist for the Australia section. And I'd like to make sure that people think about coming to these Monday RFRX meetings. I think it's a really good way not only to get more involved with our organization without the commitment of joining the online community if you don't think you need that, but you don't need to register. You just click our website with the link, and we have all sorts of fascinating speakers on all sorts of topics, and check it out weekly to see if it's something that you'd be interested in. And I don't think I mentioned it. After the talk, which is an hour and a half-ish, we then have a hangout, just like the one Jason does, and it goes for hours. So, if the speaker stays, then people can ask them questions. But then when they leave, we just continue to talk for hours.
Okay. Jason, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I did want to briefly say, to Rob's point about the Australian kind of sister organization. I saw a comment earlier in the chat about basically learning about the kind of colonial history of religion. And Australia has been prime real estate for a number of religious organizations to try and go there and capture a kind of, middle-class white, audience and people. And so it's important that even in places we think of as relatively secular, whether it's Europe or Australia, there are still huge religious efforts to try and penetrate those places and fight through their legal systems and build new flocks. So it's important work to be done all across the world. Just like Rob was saying about Muslim majority countries, we want to help secular organizations grow in those countries too and push back against kind of authoritarian regimes. So we want to do everything we can to help grow this movement. And the other thing I want to mention is I want to thank you for the work you do. Like Rob mentioned, in our resources, we often cite a lot of YouTube videos. We cite all the classics, as well as some smaller videos of people who talk about particular niche topics, because we want to have as broad a set of resources as possible. And a lot of this wouldn't be possible without the kind of atheist YouTube community. Once again, I found this organization through ACA program. Rob did. A lot of us have been exposed to this stuff post early 2000s, Four Horsemen, atheist YouTube. And all that is instrumental in helping us grow and helping us reach more and more different types of people. And I want to thank you for being a part of that. And it's just so encouraging to see people on that journey, whether they've been doing it for 20 years or they started, last year. There was never a bad time to learn about this stuff, to get exposed, to see the community, and to grow. So, yeah.
And I'd like to encourage people to, if they're not in a position to donate, they can volunteer their time if they have time to do that and they feel that it's something they'd like to do. And as we always tell people, the most famous part of our organization is the helpline, but some people don't feel comfortable, being one-on-one with somebody like that. But we need volunteers to do all sorts of things. Everything we've mentioned is staffed by volunteers. Supporting the online community, all those channels need to be moderated. We need IT people to continue to improve our software, people to, man support groups, even people when we do those Monday meetings, the final product needs to be edited and uploaded to YouTube. We need people to do that kind of thing. We need people to collect the resources and vet stuff and say, yeah, this is good or this isn't. And if it's good, I'll tell somebody they can upload it to our resource database. So, go to our main page if you feel like you can do this and click the volunteer tab, and that would be a great help.
Wonderful. I was just going to bring that up myself, and I just want to remind people one more time that this is a fundraiser. And if you would like to donate to Recovering from Religion, there is a link both pinned in the chat, or if you are watching this later on, there is a link in the description to donate. Underneath the link to donate, there is a link to the Recovering from a Religion website. If you are interested in becoming a volunteer, click on the website and there's a place where you can go to volunteer. Or if you are someone that is in need of assistance, if you need help from Recovering from Religion, you'll be on the website right there, and you can find a place where someone can help counsel you and help you through whatever kind of difficulty you're experiencing as a result of leaving your religion. Thank you.
One more thing, can I say?
Yes, go ahead.
I should have said this before. Just about a month ago, we produced a 3-minute long video. It's amazing how much information is packed into 3 minutes. It's towards the bottom of our main page, and it's called RFR What We Do. And like everything we've talked about was a lot here, but it's like summarized in a 3-minute video that you can watch and also share with friends, people who need our help.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much to both of you for coming.
Thank you so much for having us on. It was great. Thank you.
Next week, the stream is going to be a little bit different because I am having a celebration for having reached 10,000 subscribers. And so I am going to be having a lot of friends that help me make it along the way. And we're just going to hang out and have a good time and celebrate 10,000 subscribers.
Fantastic.
That's awesome.
And thank you to all of you in the chat for your comments and questions. Thank you to all of you who are watching and who donate and to volunteer to support this wonderful organization. Live your life.